His fate now lies in the hands of the state Supreme Court. Michael Skakel was dealt the blow when justices said he should return to prison. What's next for the convicted killer now that the court has a vacancy?
Chief Justice Peter Zarella has retired, and the search for a replacement could make a difference for Skakel and other cases. Former Chief State's Attorney Chris Morano has a lot to say about Skakel and the Supreme Court.
Plus, Governor Malloy says he is still undecided as to whether he will run for a third term, but Republicans and even a Democrat are lining up to take him on. Today, we'll talk with potential candidate Trumbull First Selectman Tim Herbst.
And our flashback today, 59-year-old film from the vault, the Channel 3 archives.
It's all coming up on Face the State this Sunday morning, January 15th, 2017.
From Eyewitness News, Connecticut's most watched local political program, this is Face the State.
Good morning, and thanks for tuning in to Face the State here on Channel 3. I'm Susan Raff.
And I'm Dennis House. The state Supreme Court's about to change after the retirement of one of its justices. How will that affect the appeal filed by Michael Skakel? Former Chief State's Attorney Chris Morano prosecuted the case against Skakel for the state, and he's with us today. Mr. Morano, good to see you on the program.
Good to see you as well.
Does it bring back a lot of memories? I mean, here we are, 11 years. He was in prison, he's out, and he's waiting to find out what's going to happen. Does it bring back some memories for you?
Well, it does. It's been a long road, even before his arrest, obviously, many years. And then the trial was in 2002. And my children are all grown now, and I've moved on, and we're all a little bit older and a little bit more haggard, but the wheels of justice are still examining the matter, and I anticipate that they will continue to do so in the future.
So the case is back to the state Supreme Court, yet they're going to be losing a justice, and Skakel's attorneys now want to wait till the new justice is appointed. What do you think of that?
Well, what's happened is the Supreme Court has spoken, and in a very sharply divided court, 4-3, they decided that the trial court, Judge Bishop's decision, should be overturned, that he did receive, Mr. Skakel did receive sufficient representation. As in anything in this case, there's always a twist. And right after that decision, one of the justices, the author of the decision, Justice Zarella, retired. So now there's sort of a balance. It's 3 and 3 that are left. The attorney for Mr. Skakel, Mr. Santos, a very, very talented lawyer, wants to re-argue. He wants another up at bat, and he wants to argue the case again before the Supreme Court. And he is claiming I should be able to argue it in front of 4 and 3, 7 people. And so he wants to wait until a new judge is appointed to the Supreme Court. So that's kind of where we're at, and the question is, well, what will happen?
Do you really think that there can be another trial? It's interesting, this week I spoke to Mickey Sherman, who, as you know, was Michael Skakel's attorney, and all of this is kind of on his reputation. He believes in his innocence, but regardless of that, I mean, so much time has gone by, people are deceased, there's lack of evidence. He doesn't think that there can be another trial and that there shouldn't.
Well, the lack of evidence is because of the people who are now deceased. It would be difficult to retry the case. And Mr. Santos knows that. And that's why he wants to work so hard to invalidate the conviction in whatever form he can. Whether or not the Supreme Court could hear this again is really up to the Supreme Court. And a petition to re-argue doesn't have any burden that needs to be met. It's really in the discretion of the court. But our case law in this area, and there's 2 cases that really I think this is such a unique situation that seem to fit this, are the Santiago case, which is the case that abolished the death penalty in Connecticut, and the Peeler case, which is a terrible murder case, the victim of which was the creation of the state's witness protection program. In those 2 cases, the Supreme Court justices give us some clues as to what they're going to look for. In the Peeler case, the Chief Justice says, listen, I'm not going to change and allow a re-argument. I'm going to follow the precedents that have been set here. It's called stare decisis. And she says the same thing in the Santiago case. She didn't agree with the Santiago decision to abolish the death penalty. She said, I'm not going to agree to allow the state to stay this decision until the Peeler case is heard, because I think we have to have finality and there has to be some credibility to our decisions. Another justice said in that case, I don't think you get to re-argue a case just because you want it to be in front of a group that might be more favorable to your position. And that was Justice Palmer. And so with those two things out there in the cases that I've just cited, it kind of shows the bar that has to be met and how our Supreme Court has felt.
Governor Malloy has to appoint, it's my understanding of news. How long do you think that will take? What is the process? Take us through that. And where do you think he'll look?
Well, there are many, many qualified members on the bench now that he can pick. He has a deep bench to pick from. He can pick from the appellate court. At times, they have picked from the Superior Court. Justice Palmer wasn't even a judge when he was picked by Governor Weicker. So
State's attorney, correct? Yeah.
He was the chief state's attorney. So there is a very deep bench for him to pick from. I think he's probably going. It's good that it's at this time of year because we are just starting a legislative session, so it can be addressed and not have to be in between a legislative session. But I imagine that there will be some quick action, and it really should have no bearing on the Skakel case. It should be, and I'm sure that it will be picked looking at much of a bigger picture. Who is a good fit for our Supreme Court? And we're very lucky with the Supreme Court we have, because you don't see the ideological battles as much as you see at the federal Supreme Court. And you'll have Supreme Court justices in Connecticut that will look at things, and you may try to predict what they're going to do, but you really can't often. Some you can, some you can't.
Are there names you're hearing in the legal community as to who the governor might appoint? Or who might be on a short list?
I wouldn't even want to begin to guess that for two reasons. One, I don't want to guess, and secondly, I don't want to jinx anybody. But I do think there are some very qualified people. Some names have been mentioned amongst lawyers as they sit and talk, waiting for their cases to be called, and they're all very talented jurists.
The former Chief Justice was a known conservative, was one of the dissenting, or the only one, for gay marriage. And I know that with the death penalty, and felt that it was a wrong decision to abolish it. Do you think that Malloy will steer clear of putting a conservative back in that?
Oh, well, you're talking about Justice Zarella?
Correct.
Okay. He wasn't the Chief Justice, but he, all those other descriptions you gave, right, I think are accurate. Very, very learned justice. He wrote very, very thorough decisions, as he did in the Skakel case. I don't know what Governor Malloy is going to do, but I think he will base it not on partisan views, but he'll base it upon the ability of the jurist to actually review laws and make decisions at the Supreme level, which is the highest level in our state.
As a prosecutor, I know you deal very closely with the victims' families, and you're very sympathetic to their needs. What do you say to the Moxley family? What should a prosecutor be saying now? 41 years ago, Martha Moxley was murdered, and this case is still going on.
Well, Mrs. Moxley is, I've dealt with many, many victims over the years who have lost loved ones to murders. Mrs. Moxley is the most unique. She is so gracious. She has such stamina, such character, and she waited so long, just from 1975 to 2002, to hear a jury say guilty, that she's in this for the long haul. And she isn't going to go away. She's going to follow it. She did tell me once, I heard the words I wanted to hear. I heard a jury say guilty. And she is watching this very closely, I'm sure, and knows it's going to be a long, long, long road in the future, but she's never going to give up. And she does that for her daughter.
One of the things that I found very interesting when I spoke with Mickey Sherman was I asked him, why did he think that he lost the case if he felt so strongly about innocence? And he said that he felt the jurors didn't like the family. Do you think there's some credibility to that? No,
I think the jurors decided the case based upon what was in front of them, and that was the facts and the instructions the judge gave. Now that sounds very, typical and sort of the thing you would expect me to say, but I sat in that courtroom every day and I watched those jurors. They were very, very smart. They were observing everything. At one point, they sent a note to Judge Kavanewski asking that our lead prosecutor, Mr. Benedict, ask him to speak up because they couldn't hear him. And so they watched everything. They took a long time. It took about 4 or 5 days to make their decision. I don't think it was on such a trivial thing as that. They did it on the evidence.
Chris Morano, former Chief State's Attorney, we thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for your insight.
Be interesting to see what happens on the Supreme Court. Thank you for joining us on Face the State.
And don't forget, you can watch all the segments from our show on our website. All you have to do is log on to WFSB.com.